Alright. Okay, let's start our program. Alright, good morning everybody, or rather good afternoon everybody. I hope you're having an amazing day and welcome to today's mobile phone photography workshop. Now, my name is Fabian and I'm a full-time photographer and videographer for events and weddings for more than 14 years. And I'm also a certified ACE fitness trainer for the last 2 years. So today I will be conducting the workshop on mobile phone photography. And hopefully we can all learn something from today's workshop. Now, there's a saying in the world of photography that digital photography has democratized the photography world. But if you really come to think about it, there's only one thing that is democratizing photography. And it is this. Yeah? Your mobile phone, that's right. Now, the famous photographer and educator Charles Davis once said, "The best camera you can have is the camera with you." Now, photographs are not about megapixels or dynamic range, but more importantly, it is about stories and moments of your life. Yes. After all, it is the photos that tell the stories, and any photos is better than no photos. Okay? And with that, we'll hop on to today's workshop on mobile phone photography. Now, before we start, let's take a look at what we will be learning in today's workshop. Now, in this workshop, we will first understand the advantages and limitations of the mobile phone. And then I will share with you some tips for taking better photos. And after that, we will learn something about framing and composition and how to make use of them in our photography. And then we will touch on something very interesting. We will touch on some tips for taking better selfies as well as for your partners and friends or even your families. We will be taking a look at some of the photo editing apps that's around in the app stores today. And lastly, to wrap up this workshop, we will touch on some useful adjustments in the apps and how we can make use of them to edit the photos. Okay? And if you have any questions during the workshop, please save them to the last, because we will also have a Q&A session to answer your questions. Okay? Now, without further ado, let's start. Alright, so what are the advantages and limitations of a mobile phone? Now, the first advantage of a mobile phone is that it is compact in size. Yeah? And hence you can bring it along wherever you go, and also it is very easy to use and has got really good daylight performance. Now, this point is very important, which we will look further in depth as we move on. Yeah? And lastly, also, the mobile phone industry is always changing and it's always evolving. And hence, we are always getting better and better camera performance out of this small pocket camera. So then, what are its limitations? Well, due to the small sensor size, or small size of camera, the sensor is also small. Because of the small sensor size, it hence restricting the low light performance of the camera. And also because of the small sensor size, the bokeh of the lens is limited. The bokeh is the out of area focus in the photograph. Next is the fixed focal length in the camera. Also means that the zoom ability of the camera is limited. So it's almost like you have a fixed lens. Although you can physically just crop in the lens, this usually degrades. You actually crop in the photos. So this will usually degrades the quality of the photos taken. And lastly, it is with the color issues. Now, however, with the newer cameras, the color issue has become less and less of a problem. But nevertheless, we can still perk up your image when we put them through the photo editing apps, which we will take a look later. Alright, now let's take a look at some tips for taking better photos. So, the first tips for taking better photos is to improve the stability of the camera. After all, a more stable camera equals to a sharper image equals to a better photos. So, how do we ensure stability? Well, first of all, I always like to share with people to use your volume button on the side to snap the photos. Now, this may not actually work in some of the apps, but in your native camera apps, it works, So a useful tips that I like to always share with people is to use the volume button on the side when taking a photos. Now the trigger button on the screen is not always easy to reach, especially when you're trying to take a selfie. And sometimes this will create a minor shake in your camera when taking the photos. So by using the volume button on the sides, you can easily help to rectify this. Okay, next is to embrace support. Now what do I mean? Now you can improve the stability of the camera by embracing support. What do I mean? Well, you can brace yourself or your phone against something stationary, for example, like a wall, counter, a fence, railing, or even a water bottle. Yeah? Yeah. Okay, last but not least is to use a self-timer. Now, besides embracing support, you can also use a self-timer when taking a photo. Now, in this way, you can concentrate firm on holding on to the cameras whilst taking the photos. So a self-timer is also good when we are alone and don't have someone else to take photos for us. Now this is also a good time to rely on embracing support for our camera, which we talked about just now. Now if you cannot find any support, simply get a tripod with an appropriate clamp like the one in the photos. Yeah. Now this is a Manfrotto Pixie Evo 2 mini tripod with the Manfrotto smartphone clamp. So the bottom line is that whether or not you're taking a photo of someone or a selfie, you need to be stable. Now the next thing that you need to know is how to set the correct exposure and focus. Knowing how to set the correct exposure and focus is critical. So how do we do that in a camera? Well, you do that by simply tapping and sliding. So you tap to focus and you slide to adjust. Now what do I mean? Well, you tap on the area that you want to focus and you slide up or down to adjust the exposure. Now for those of you who is using an Android phone, it is left or right. Why? Why tapping, why adjusting, making sure that the focus is correct is important. Because sometimes when we just take a photo up, camera up, and we focus on the things that we want, or point at the things that we want to photograph. Sometimes the camera just guess, your main subject which you want to photo, which may not be the subject that you are interested in. So in this case, it's best to click on the areas or the subject that you want to focus on and lock your focus over there. Yeah, so you get the focus that you want. So now here's the example. For example, you're traveling now, now that COVID has opened up, that was like so long ago, yeah. You're going for travel, and then you look see the clouds. And then sometimes if you just hold up the phone, you notice that sometimes the phone will focus on the termite. Yeah, so in order to overcome this, what we can do is we can just simply tap on the clouds that we want, the area, say the clouds, and lock the focus over there. And then after that, sometimes of course the cameras will guess your exposure, whether or not it's too bright or too dark. So if it's too dark, you simply tap on the areas, and for iPhone, you just simply slide up. And of course, the Android phone is slide left or right, depending. Or you go to the opposite side if it's too bright. In the case of iPhone, you slide down. Okay? So this is how you adjust your exposure. Now, next. So have anyone seen this type of photos before? Now, does this photos look familiar to you? Now, when they see this type of photos, does it occur to you that, now it's good time to get a new phone, new camera, new technology. Yeah. Bad thing is that we have to spend money again. Again, back to the good news. The good news is that, well, you may not need to actually buy a new phone or the new camera, because it is just likely that your camera lens is dirty. So the next tip that I have for you is to clean your lens before taking the photos. Now every day, many of us hold our phones in our hands, and sometimes we put it in our pocket or in our handbag, and when we take it out, it may accidentally leave these fingerprints or smudges on the camera lens. And sometimes we may not notice them when we use it to take the photos. Yeah. So if you take a look at all these images of the lens, you notice that there's smudges and fingerprints all over. And this is not surprising because I've done a lot of event shoots, and then there are some more elderly people, who has pretty sophisticated, mobile phone. And sometimes they'll ask me, after I taken the official shots, they'll ask me, can you please take my phone and help us to take a photo so I can share via WhatsApp. And sometimes when I use the phone, when you open it up, I can tell the latest phone, it was so smudgy, it looks so dreamy. And the good thing is that, yeah, everybody looks good. Yeah. Because there's a skin smoothing effect when you're using that. So you basically skip the app, so you don't have to use the 美图秀秀 app. It's just raw. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, back to it. Yeah. So if you take a look at these two photos, yeah. So you notice that left photos looks a bit blurry. The right photos is after you have cleaned up your lens. Same thing on the second photos. You look at skies, it looks a bit dreamy, which some people actually like it. Perhaps that's also the reason why they don't bother to clean the lens, because every selfie looks amazing. It's like 10 years younger. Flawless skin. Wow. Yeah. So if you take a look at these photos carefully, you'll notice that there's a big difference in terms of the quality of the photos, the sharpness as well as the clarity of the image. So just a simple wipe on the lens and it will make your camera phone brand new. So sometimes we just don't think about it, and so remember to do this before taking photos, and you'll be amazed at what a simple wipe can do to your photos. Or if you want to look better, you can just simply, rub and leave your fingerprints on the lens. You hear it first from this workshop. Okay? Alright, so now next, let's touch on framing and composition. So what is framing? Yeah. Now framing is a technique to draw the attention to the main subject. Yeah. And composition is the rest of the frame which helps to enhance or complement the main subject. So then, how do we achieve good framing and composition? Okay, so one of the techniques that I like to use is to frame my subject is the rules of third. Now, in photography, the rules of third is a type of composition in which an image is divided evenly into thirds, both horizontally and vertically. Yeah. So the subject of the image is often placed at the intersection of the dividing lines or along the lines itself. So what does all this mean? So let's take a look at some examples. So if you take a look at the first photos on the left, you'll notice that the trees falls along the vertical lines of the image, 1/3 of the image. Yeah. And the sun again falls at the other side on 1/3 of the image itself. Yeah. And you notice the sun falls along the horizontal lines and the tree falls at the vertical dividing lines. Yeah. So if you have two subjects, one's primary and one secondary, you can create an interesting composition by placing them at either side of the image. Okay, then moving on to the second image, this is the Wanaka tree in New Zealand. So again, if you take a look at the horizon, it falls somewhere around the top upper horizontal line of the frame, and the tree and the reflection of the tree in water fall somewhere around the third of the frame. Yeah, so this is intersection of the horizontal and vertical line, in fact, this one. So it's pretty well done. Pretty well done. Yeah. Okay, last photos over here, if you take a look at the mountains right at the back and waterfall at the foreground, you'll notice again that the tip of the mountain falls along the intersection of the horizontal and vertical lines. And again, the waterfall falls somewhere around the third of the frame at the opposite side. Okay, so this is again how you can place your primary and secondary subject if you have two subjects. Yeah, what if you have more? there's a saying, less is more. So 2 is good, 3 is a party. Okay. Alright, next we'll move on to the framing techniques I like to use is called leading lines. Now the leading lines are visual lines or shapes that appears in a composition that are used to draw the viewer's attention in a specific direction or towards a designated subject or portion of the photograph. Yeah. So they are also excellent way to create depth and symmetry in the photos. Yeah. That means that you can feel that something's at the front and something's at the back. So you can use that as a leading line. So again, let's take a look at some examples of the leading lines. So again, if we take a look at the first image here, now if you notice that the two sides of the trees, okay, forms like a straight line leading our eyes, our vision towards into the photos, framing the couple. Yeah. So this is again how we can use it to frame our photos or lead our eyes towards the subject that we want the viewers to take note of. Again, if you take a look at this photo, you'll notice that the foreground, the concrete floor, falls somewhere around the third of the frame, which we talked about earlier. So this is much like the combination of rules of third plus the leading lines. And so, you can actually combine different composition or framing techniques in the photos. Okay. And second, now, remember what we talked about earlier about leading lines. Leading lines are not only about lines, but it also can be repeated patterns or shapes. So in this case, in Kyoto, we have this torii gates. Okay, and there are so many that repeated the shapes in the photos. Yeah. So again, this is how you can use repeated patterns as a means of framing your shot. Now in this shot, the object is actually a tiny lantern that was hanging at one of the torii gates somewhere around the middle. Yeah. So it's important to have a subject no matter how small, but in these photos it looks small, but if it's in a normal size, it looks okay. You can see that there's a lantern over there. Or you can simply place your loved ones or one of your families over there and it could create a very nice framing. Yeah. But important thing is that when we're actually doing the composition, right, when you're trying to frame something, just remember to frame something, Don't, if you're gonna frame the sky, not that the sky has to be some interesting clouds or plane. Don't just frame just a blue sky, a huge patch of blue, or a huge patch of green, or huge patch of one color. It's gonna be quite challenging. You will need a write-up to explain what the photos is trying to convey. But if you do well, the photos will explain itself. Okay? You heard it first from this workshop. Because I see a lot of people who just does photography just point blank, are framing something point blank. So, I get the framing, but I don't get the story. Yeah. So remember to try to frame a subject. Yeah. Reasonably sized subject that you can find. Don't go and frame a subject that's so small that say, I don't see anything. Then no, it's over there. It's over there. It's just. So yeah. Okay. All right. So last photos, if we take a look at here now, if you see the pyramid, you notice that the foreground, the road itself, you see, it forms like a line leading our eye line in the direction of the pyramid. Yeah. So sometimes there are even winding roads, winding trees, or forests, or a line of a neatly row of grass or pathway can be used as a leading lines to compose your image. Yeah. So again, leading lines doesn't have to be like symmetrical. It could be like over here, like the pyramid, like the road itself leading our eyes towards the main subject. Yeah. Also, if you notice that the camels, they forms like a repeated pattern. You see, we have two camels, the middle ground got two camels, and it forms like a repeated pattern itself. So repeated patterns doesn't have to be like exactly the same, but it could be like quite similar, like pebbles. Yeah, could be a repeated patterns. Okay, well, talk too much, so let's move on. Now, besides the rules of the third and leading lines, you can also make the photos more interesting by changing the angles and perspective. Now, creative ways to use the camera angles is one of the most fundamental and quickest way to add interest and variety to your photos. Whereas perspective in photography is a sense of spatial relationship between the subjects and dimension within the frame itself. Now, what do I mean? Now, in changing the angles and perspective of the camera, subjects can appear much larger or smaller than normal in relation to the rest of the composition. Wow! Now, how can we do that? Now, we do that by getting high or going low, and by getting closer or going further away. Now, what does all this mean? Well, let's get to some examples. Now, taking advantages of the small size of the camera, we can now easily raise your camera high into the air or go down really low on the ground. Yeah, to change the angles of the shot. So once high angle, now if you take a look at this shot, this is the spiral staircase in the Vatican City. Yeah, so now the small camera size, you can now raise the camera over the ledge or the railing to take a photos like this. So you see a very nice composition spiraling down. It's got a lot of depth. Again, it has a very interesting composition. Yeah, but it has a lot of depth basically. Okay, or you can go really low down. So bring cameras really low down to the floor and then shooting up. Yeah. So again, if you take a look at second photo, you'll notice that again, the framing techniques, like the leading lines, is being used on the both sides of the road, created by the rows of trees. So again, this is a combination of low angles and leading lines. Okay. Perspective. Now you can also move in closer or further away from the subject easily in order to change the perspective or the spatial dimension of the subject itself. Now if you take a look at example of the Feast of Hercules, now this is the Feast of Hercules outside the Temple of Hercules in Amman, Jordan. Okay, so if you are doubtful whether or not this is the Feast of Hercules, this is the Feast of Hercules. Yeah, they actually have erected a statue of Hercules. And somehow, by the acts of nature, the feast has fallen off from Hercules. Yeah. So if you take a look at this first photos, you think that, oh wow, this feast looks quite big. Yeah. But again, if you take a couple of steps back and photograph it from a distance away, you notice that, the feast in relationship to a person is actually not as big as like it was in the first photos. So this is called perspective, and this is very important to remember, because in the next section we're going to talk about selfie and how to photograph people, and perspective plays a very reasonably big role in taking selfie as well as for your group shots. Okay, so remember this. So this is called a change in perspective. Alright, okay, so now moving on to the next portion on taking selfies and people. Initially, I wanted to separate this into two sections. Yeah, one for taking selfie, one for taking people, but then I realized they're very similar, if not the same. Because many of the tips related to selfies can also be applied to taking photos of people like a family and friends. So once you master the trick of taking a nice picture of yourself, you can easily apply the same tricks and techniques to photograph your family and friends. Yes. So now, before actually taking the shot, let's take a look at what we can do before actually taking the shot itself. So what are some things to look out for before the shoot? Now, first, find an interesting background. So first of all, try to find an interesting background and simply just check around surrounding before you take the shot to avoid funny incidents or any CSI incidents that, you never know what happened. You may end up in one of the viral video or viral photo. And if you want, why not? You have a lot of photos, a lot of views, and you may be an instant star. Yeah. Okay. Second is to find a good and natural light if possible. Now, just like what we mentioned earlier, due to the small sensor size of the phone camera, it does not do well in poor lighting. So try to find some nice bright areas to take the photos. And also look out for those patchy lightings unless you're going for those artistic abstract look. Otherwise, it is best to avoid patchy lightings. Okay, next is to set up the shot. Now sometimes we might need to shift the things around, so don't be afraid to kind of just move the cups or plates around. Yeah, so you'll be surprised at what a difference a subtle move can make to your photos. Now, besides this, be positive about taking the photos and encourage your family and friends. A positive vibe will usually result in better photos. Lastly, but not least, don't be afraid to guide them. Yeah, shift them around a bit, ask them to look up and down, turn their face a bit. You'll be surprised at how much better a subtle move like this can make to your photos. Okay, next. Alright, so how to look good in front of the camera. Now, how to look slimmer. How to look good. How to look slimmer. Now, most of us like to look slimmer in the photos. Me included. Yeah, so how do we start? Well, we can do that by simply changing the angles of the camera. So remember the perspective that we talked about earlier? Anything that's closer to the camera will look bigger and anything that's further away will look smaller. So, what I like you should to do usually is to hold the camera above the head. Yeah, and then the secret is to tilt down a bit. Okay, so our face are slightly closer to the cameras and our body is slightly further away from the camera. So this has a very nice slimming effect to our body. So it's like the V-tapered. Yeah, it also has the effect of slimming down your face, so it gives you a more sharper look. You heard it first from this workshop. Okay. And for the ladies, you can also play with your hair a bit by pushing their hair, slightly to the front to frame your face, So this will also give you a slightly slimmer look to your face. Okay. Next is the heroic shot, or sometimes I refer to it as the look taller shot. Now this is good for photographing people. Now this can be achieved by having a camera somewhere around the waist area, and this time instead of tilting down, you actually tilt upwards. Yeah. So when I photograph people, so you actually put here, just tilt up. So this has effect of slimming, not only slimming down the people, but also making the person looks a little bit taller. Yeah. Okay, next is the moody look. Now, if you are taking selfie in this way, holding the cameras and shooting upwards can sometimes result in a moody feel or those cool look that some people are looking for. So when you are taking a selfie, okay, now you can actually put it a bit lower. So you can always look down. Yeah. So again, you will pull your chin a bit lower, longer. Yeah. So it has that cool and heroic, those cool and moody look. Okay. Lastly, so when in doubt, should I or should I not smile? If you are in doubt, go for the soft smile look. Yeah. What is a small soft smile look? It's the smile that you do not see your teeth. or you're just barely splitting your lips. Yeah, to have that infectious, friendly, approachable, click, like, and follow smile. Okay, the next tip for you is to find good light or stand in good light. After all, a more gorgeous lighting equals a more flattering selfie. Yeah, always look for good light. So how do you find good light? Well, you can find good, but one of the ways that I find good light, let's say we're in a environment with a lot of lights, we're not sure, definitely there's some direction with better lights. So what I like to do is to hold a palm in front of me and then spin myself 360 degrees. So if I find that my palm looks really good, or if the light that falling on my palm looks really good, that means I found my good light. Where is it? It's not right in front of me. It's directly behind me. Yeah. So what I like to do is just, once I find a good light, I just turn 180 degrees to face the light. Yeah. So that's how you can find a good light. Yeah. Now, sometimes we find the light, and then when you're facing the light, you may find the light is too bright. Yeah. So what I like to do is, like, before I take a shot, I got to close my eyes, and before I take a shot, I just open my eyes and take the shot. So you're not squiggling. Not squiggling. Not like the sun. Okay. So you can also guide your family and friends to do the same. And last but not least, my final tip for you is to take many selfies. Yeah. Take many selfies. Don't be shy, because even models takes a lot of photos before getting the ideal one. Yeah. And all in all, remember to have fun and look great. And with that, let's take a look at what are the mobile apps that are available in the app stores today. Now, there are a lot of apps available these days and for editing your photos on the phone. Now, the common ones are Snapseed, Lightroom, Facetune. Facetune has two versions. Yeah, the free version and the paid version. And then we have VSCO and also Line Camera. Of course, there are a lot more than this these days. Yeah. This list needs to be updated. Anyway, you know what I mean. Okay, it's better. Better angle. It's actually a bit off-center, but anyway. Now, however, today we are only going to talk about the app called Snapseed, which is from Google and is commonly used among Instagrammers for their social media photos. We'll learn 10 adjustments in the apps which we can use to edit the photos. Now, these adjustments are common among the various apps, and you have something similar, you can always apply this adjustment just the same way as you do in Snapseed. Now, here I will go through each adjustment and explain what to do. However, I will not be spending time doing it hands-on due to time constraint. But nevertheless, you can always play around with them in your own time once you know what to do. Okay? With that, let's begin. Now, if you have your Snapseed, you can now, and you have taken some photos, you can now go on to Snapseed, and Snapseed, it will prompt you to open an image. Yeah? So once you open an image, you'll be prompted to, once you open the app, you'll be prompted to open an image, and then just go ahead and open up an image. And then after that, when you go to Tools, which is on the top right hand corner, and once you go to Tools, and then you're going to do like on the bottom right, you go to Tune Image. Yeah, Tune Image. So the first adjustment that I want you to look at is the brightness slider. Now, brightness is sometimes referred to as the exposure. Yeah. Now, what's the difference between exposure slider and brightness slider? Well, they both have the similar effect of brightening up an image. However, the main difference that I found is that exposure really targets the brightest part of the photos and makes them even brighter, almost to the point of overexposure, and it does so pretty quickly. Brightness, on the other hand, still maintains the overall brightness, but it does more to the mid-tone area. Yeah, so it does not really clips or overexpose the image that quickly, especially the bright areas or the highlighted areas. So with a simple edit, you can now enhance the photos in a couple of seconds. Second slider. Second slider that I want you to look at is the saturation. Now we'll come back to contrast in a while. So now saturation is the adjustment of color intensity of all the colors in the photos. And sometimes you also find vibrance. Now the biggest difference between saturation and vibrance is that while saturation increases or decreases the overall colors of the image, vibrance focuses more on the subdued colors such as the greens or blue and lesser effects on the orange and yellow. Okay, now that we come back to contrast. Now contrast is a great function to use if your photos looks a bit washed out and you would like to add a little bit more depth to it. Yeah? It also has a subtle effects of making a blurry image slightly a tad sharper. Okay. Why? Because it increases the blacks and the whites at the contrast region. So it gives a perceived impression that it is sharpening. Okay, next is the ambience function. Now, ambience function in Snapseed is sort of like a catch-all function. So, if you do not want to mess with the brightness, color, and contrast on your own, you can try the ambience function under the tools and see if it works for you. So, by swiping left, the image will have less color, less brightness, but more contrast. So, swiping on the right will do the opposite. Next is the highlights. Now, highlight slider adjusts the bright values in the photos. Now, the true utility of highlight slider is to recover the lost details in the brightest part of the image or to globally brighten your image. Next is the shadow slider. Now, the shadow slider adjusts only the areas in the photos that are dark but still retains some details. Now, shadows do not have to be black or gray, they come in any colors. Now the last slider is the warmth slider, which I will not go through as it is similar to the white balance, which I'll be touching on in the next slide. White balance. Now the white balance function under the tools menus allows you to adjust the temperature and tints in one setting. Now the positive temperatures will make the picture looks more yellow and negative temperature will make the picture looks more blue. Positive temperature is great if you want to make something look a bit like sunnier. Okay? Now moving down to tint. Now positive tints will make the photos more purple and negative tints will make the photos more green. Now this is especially good when you're trying to make adjustment for the skin tone. Okay, because sometimes when we photograph a person, the skin tone may look a little bit like greenish. So you can actually use tint to correct the greenish color or the tint of the skin tone. And next, we'll take a look at the brush tool. Now, the brush tool function is used to target specific areas in the photos for certain edits, as well as exposure, saturation, temperature, or dodge and burn. Okay, so the tool is helpful if you do not want to edit the photos globally, but instead wants to adjust only a portion of the image. So dodge is to make the areas more bright. Burn is to make the areas more dark. Okay, next we'll move on to the healing tool. Now the healing tool is one of the most coolest but also the trickiest tool in Snapseed. Now the healing function can help you get rid of any unwanted parts in the photos like people's cars, building or anything that you want to remove. So if you take a look at the photos over here, yeah, you notice that eyes of the cats are missing. Whereas if I go back to the previous slide, you notice that the eyes are there. Yeah. So this image is to illustrate the use of the healing tool. So you can literally clone out anything that you do not want. It could be a piece of rubbish, a tissue paper, or sometimes anything that you want to remove. In this case, it's the cat's eye. Okay, next is let's take a look at the perspective tool. Now, perspective tool is an amazing function in Snapseed. Now, you can use it to tilt down to make the person look taller or shorter, or left or right to correct any perspective. You can also rotate and scale the image. Now, this is a very interesting tool. I like to use the tilt. Yeah, so for tilt, you can actually swipe left or right to change the perspective. And then up or down, of course, to make the person look taller or shorter. Now, why is this good? Now, let's say, for example, we are taking the shot of a group. And then somehow the other way, there's a lot of photographers over there, and then you're not right in the middle. So if you're in a group of like here, maybe about 10 person, and you're off center, the person that is closer to your camera will be bigger. Yeah, and the person that's further away, some people in the group that's further away will look smaller, right? It's not what we learned earlier. Anything that's closer to the camera will look bigger. Anything that's further away will look smaller. So how? Then the picture will look quite funny. So in this case, you can actually use the tilt function, which we can actually either slide left or right to actually correct the perspective. Yeah. So we make the person at the closer to the camera slightly smaller, and we push the perspective of the person that's further away closer to you. So you have a more balanced looking photos. Okay. So that's why I said that perspective is very important in photography. And getting close and far, it changes the whole feel of the image and the correctness of the image itself. Okay, so once we have done all the correction, color correction, make all the adjustment, make all the cropping, here whatever I need to do, make it white, make sure the color balance are okay. We want to save the photos. So how do we save the photos? Well, you just simply click on the button on the bottom, like a tick mark over here, yeah, and then you bring you back to the main screen. And the main screen, you go down below, bottom right, and then you click export. So after you click the export button, you have a couple of options. The first option is save. So what it does is save the changes that you can undo. So after you save the changes with the new edits, if you find that you want to change anything else, you can bring the image back to the snap seed again, and then you can go to the history, go back to the history, and then undo anything that you do not want, or make adjustment to the previous edits that you have done for. So that's save. It's very straightforward. Okay, next is to save a copy. Now this simply does is it creates the duplicate copies and then save all the changes that I made to the original copy. Okay. Lastly is to export a copy. Now the last is the permanent copy. Means to say that you actually create a copy with the permanent changes. So in the phone, you have two copies. Okay, one that's original and one with the permanent changes. A permanent edit being embedded. Okay? And with that, your changes are saved in the image. So it is just that simple. Okay? And with that, we have come to the end of the workshop. Yeah. And now we have the Q&A portion of the workshop. And if you have no questions, and if you'd like to follow me on my Facebook and Instagram, these are my handles. Do you have any question for me? If not, I'd like to say a big thank you to all of you for your attention and attending this workshop. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed this workshop and learned something from today's workshop. Okay. Thank you very much and have a great weekend ahead. Keep shooting. Bye.